All right. So, hey, everybody, this is Joe coming to, AKA Cinco, coming to you again with another episode of the Bitcoin Mining Show. This week, we have a cool special guest. We are talking with somebody who does work behind the scenes in Bitcoin mining that most people don't think about until it's probably not necessarily too late, but when it's a problem. And these are the guys that solve those problems for us because a lot of us can't solve these problems. So, this week, we're going to be talking with Alex from over at Eon Digital. These guys are a repair center. So they fix the stuff that we have that breaks, like my S21 pluses that went down 2 weeks ago and are still offline. These are the type of guys that'll get those suckers running again for us. Alex, how you doing, man?
Good, Joe. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate your time today, sir.
Hey, no, I appreciate you coming on, man. I'm glad that Chris and Avril got to meet up with you at the Bitcoin conference in Vegas, and that we were able to hook up and do this because, again, this is one of those areas of Bitcoin mining I think that a lot of like home miners don't think about until it happens. But having people out there that are not necessarily like the, for lack of a better term, like the Bitmain facility that will put you into that, into their system to be fixed whenever it can be fixed. There's other solutions that are mostly better and probably quicker. So I appreciate you coming on and doing this. If you don't mind, can you kind of give my folks out there a little brief about like who you are and what Eon Digital does, just kind of the elevator pitch?
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. So my name's Alex. I'm the SVP here at Eon Digital. We are a Bitcoin mining company that we started Bitcoin mining, years ago, and then somewhere around 2024 we incorporated, as one does, and we had machines at different sites, and those machines, as hardware does, failed eventually.
Mhm.
So we were like, oh man, we can't just have all these machines sitting around doing nothing. So we decided, well, let's develop a repair process. At the time, there was like next to no documentation out there. So it was just kind of one of those things where we jumped right in, and we figured it out. I had a good amount of technical background. I worked in the PCBA manufacturing industry. So my transition into minor repair felt pretty natural. There was a lot of crossover with that. Once we had kind of figured out how to fix our machines, and had them hashing, some of our buddies found out that we were able to repair these things, and we're like, any chance you might want to fix mine? They're all broken. We were like, Send them on over." And then, one thing led to another. And, now we're kind of up to our eyeballs in broken Bitcoin miners. So we're doing our best to support the infrastructure that's out there. We want hash rate back online. We want the Bitcoin network secured. We want transactions on the blockchain. And we want to stack stats.
Right on. Hey, and that's cool, man. That's awesome. So Bitcoin miners kind of transition and open that other revenue stream for your business. And recently I had a guest on. His name's Nico Smid. He's the guy who runs it's Digital Mining Solutions. He's like a consultant and he has a newsletter as well where he talks to people who are like either starting up a Bitcoin business like in a professional sense, not like out of the garage or hosting like I do, but like from a professional sense, getting that next step into the world. And one of the things he had talked about was he discusses like auxiliary revenue streams for businesses. So if maybe the Bitcoin isn't flowing as you need it to for the business, you have other things you can do to keep the lights on. And one of the main things he recommended was, if you're able to do repairs, why not become the outsourced location for other people's repairs that can't do it? Sounds like that's what you guys did. You kind of found that other revenue stream.
Yeah, honestly, and like a lot of other miners, we did start, small, and then we naturally progressed. We got more and more machines, and like I said, as hardware does, it fails. So then, at one point, after we figured out the repair process, we were like, well, we have these, miners making us money, but the hash rate is, at a certain point, and we were looking for other ways to kind of extend into the Bitcoin industry, and now we have this other skill that sort of provides value. What if we took it to the marketplace? What if we allowed that to sort of be another arm of revenue into our business? And so far it's been great.
That's awesome. And you guys still mine as well, I assume?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
thought so.
yep,
I
we
just
do.
wanted to double check, but I figured. Okay, so good.
Yeah.
All right. And I've recently gone through this. I had two S21 pluses fail recently on me, one about 2 weeks apart. And it was one of those things like, for a small guy, when one goes down, it's like, oh, this sucks. But then another one goes down and it's like the light goes on. It's like, oh crap. Like,
Panic.
yeah, exactly. Right. Like 2 units for me going down. That's pretty big for me. That's a chunk. That's a chunk of my hash rate that's just not there anymore. What's the most common failures you guys see coming across with like the modern ASIC miners, like 19s and up?
For 19s and up, it depends on your infrastructure setup. Honestly, like a lot of the larger scale miners, they're drawing a large load from the grid, and we'll see a lot of power supply failures, which then results in the actual hashboard failures. Power supply becoming stable, and any sort of event that's catastrophic in the power supply often translates to defects in the actual hashboards themselves. So even though like sometimes you can get lucky and just replace the power supply and you're back up and running and good.
Mhm.
A lot of times we see that power issues, especially surrounding events like curtailment, which is a very important revenue stream for a lot of these mid and larger cap companies. They need to be in the demand response program, in order to have that extra arm of revenue. So it's a necessity to have curtailments for large facilities. And in doing so, the nature of how these machines initialize and start up and shut down, it involves a lot of thermal load. So
Mhm.
that thermal load transfers to, problems with your hashboard afterwards, where ASICs, we've seen some cases where the entire die in the ASIC is cracked right down the middle or blown out. So
Mhm.
a lot of these are hashboard repairs eventually.
I feel that, and I'm down here in Texas, and we have ERCOT. I'm sure you've heard of ERCOT.
Oh
Um,
yes.
have a hate relationship with ERCOT, and power goes up and down. I'm outside of Houston. Power here goes up and down like crazy. I have a battery backup on my house now, which saves a lot of my in-house stuff. Most of my stuff's hosted, but the stuff I got in-house. But I did lose an S19 while back because power was going up and down. I wasn't home, and the power was going up and down, up and down, up and down, and it actually damaged my S19 from that because it was it was just cycling and cycling and cycling, and it just destroyed my S19. So I feel that like that hits me in the feels. So I get
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
For sure. Yeah, that thermal load is super important, managing your uptime and watching, your machine. Like if you reboot it multiple times and maybe you don't even know you have a defect, in your PS2 and you just keep rebooting and rebooting, that can often lead to defect as well.
Have you noticed like we see a lot of the new aftermarket firmwares coming out, right? And that's giving facility runners, the miners, a little more ability to track that and manage that better than maybe the stock firmwares. Have you seen any that are like actually making that a little better in the miner sphere?
I think there's some very cool features in aftermarket firmwares. Obviously, I can't make an official endorsement
Sure.
of
Yeah.
one because we don't have any partnerships with any of
Right.
the aftermarket firmwares. But I will say that we tend to use brains on most of our production units, so that we can, especially in a state like New York,
Mhm.
where we have extreme weather cycles. At
Yeah.
one point during the summertime, it could be 100 degrees, and then in winter it can be negative. So we can set a power target, an actual wattage use target, in that. And I know that feature is, ubiquitous across most third parties. We just, have been using brains for a while, so we've stuck with them. And having the ability to set a power target with how much wattage we want to use per miner, it has been super critical for our operational uptime. Like the last thing you want to do is, walk into your mine and you see all those red flashing LEDs, and you go in your dashboard and you see overheat, 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 which is a big problem for summertime, especially with like other environmental factors like the cottonwood that's flying all over the place. That clogs up your intake filter, and then next thing you know, your ambient temperature is 90 degrees.
Hmm. Yep.
So being able to set power curves is a fantastic feature that, like I said, is in most of the aftermarket firmwares.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I stopped running my big boys here at the house. Is my screen name's Cinco Doggos. I have 5 dogs and huskies, so it's
Oh boy.
constant hair is the issue in my house. We have tumbleweeds, so like that's like a weekly
Oh,
clean on on the big miners. So yeah, no,
yeah, I can imagine. Oh
mhm.
boy.
Yeah, so it's better to just outsource it and have them hosted. It was much, and of course the power costs are much better doing that on newer generation miners, right? Like thinking back to like S9s, like I could take an S9, I could throw it out of my driveway, I can kick it down the driveway a couple times, I can bring it back into the garage, I can reseat the hashboard in it and turn it on, and it'll probably run like nothing's wrong with it. Are you finding that the modern miners, not just Bitmain, but whoever that you guys are seeing, are you finding that they're more reliable, easier to repair, or do you think they're how does that compare to the old days?
So as you know, hardware has evolved from the more early on years. You know, we saw things like S9s, which anybody who's familiar with an S9 knows that they have the heat sinks on both sides
Mhm.
with the top. You know, those top heat sinks. You know, if you ever had an S9 explode, you know, you hear that popcorn sound with the it sounds like jingle bells.
Mhm.
As far as repairability, the S9s were definitely a little bit of a pain in the butt because you had to remove each one of those heat sinks to get access to the ASICs underneath to then be able to troubleshoot those circuits. There were a few tips and tricks that, you know, you could use for a little bit easier access. As hardware's evolved, you know, being able to remove the entire heatsink, you know, most of them come in two pieces now
Mhm.
and, you know, three on the bottom. You know, the real accessibility issue is just making sure those hashboards are clean when they're in the repair room, you know, as opposed to, you know, having a tech sit there with a hot air pencil, removing, you know, a row of heat sinks in order to get access to a specific domain to be able to even start troubleshooting, you
Right.
know, effectively. So now as we've gone and the marketplace is sort of the, you know, the hardware has matured a little bit, that there are a few designs that make the newer models a little bit more accessible when it comes to troubleshooting and repair. One, definitely the heat sinks being able to come off all in, you know, like one piece has been a huge advantage. And special shout out to Bitmain for removing that plastic film that they used to put over S19J Pros.
Uh-huh.
What in the world? You know, like at one point we did a an analysis on the material, and it turns out it's just a normal adhesive with slight conductive materials contained in it. So I'd be interested to talk to the engineer that made that design choice.
Thought that was a good idea, right? Yeah, like what was the purpose of this? Oh man. And you got to wonder too, like, is it something they're like, let's put this on there just to see when it comes into the facility if somebody tinkered with it? Like, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
tattletales.
every repair technician, you know, knew the pain of having to get that film off to troubleshoot your A6.
Mhm. Crazy, crazy stuff. What's the biggest mistake that you guys see miners make after a machine starts showing signs of trouble?
Sitting on, you know, downed machines. You know, a lot of times, especially in larger operations, you know, it's hardware failures are unavoidable. There's no way around it. You know, we're battling the laws of physics here, especially with devices that are, you know, high power density. You know, each one of these PSUs are between, you know, the newer generation, like 3.5 kW, and, you know, some of the hydro ones are up to 10 kW now. And so they produce a lot of heat, which, you know, in turn causes failures, you know, naturally. You can, you know, like you were saying, you can see one go down and you're like, oh, okay. And then the next one goes down and you're like, oh, crap. Imagine that on the scale of an institutional
Yeah.
level where they're like, one day they show up, you know, or they're monitoring their dashboard remote and they just see, you know, a whole cell go down, or if that problem has compounded over time and they're just like, they kind of hand the buck off to somebody else and they're like, all right, figure out this, how we would get these fixed. And then, you know, the clock keeps ticking, you know, 2 weeks later, you know, they're still sitting on, you know, two, three, four pallets of defective units
Mhm.
that are no longer operational. Your hash rate's down, your uptime target is starting to creep lower and lower and lower.
Mhm.
You know, really getting on the ball, getting those units repaired, especially if you're still on the ROI clock, especially if you're on the ROI
Yes.
clock, because the Bitmain warranty, it doesn't last the whole time. You know, you're still looking at ROI beyond the RMA period. Getting those units down quick, having an operation that's efficient to, you know, assess what needs to go to repair, what maybe just needs a PSU swap, and then taking action.
Right.
Taking action is the biggest, you know, blocker to getting your hash rate back up online. So
Mhm.
being expedient and, you know, efficient in your action, getting those units out, repaired, and back in your racks and your hash rate and your uptime back to target.
Absolutely. No, that's good stuff. Yeah. Every second a miner's down, it's costing money one way or another. So better to just get in
Yeah.
front of it.
Yeah.
Mhm. All right. So if you could give one maintenance tip that would extend the life of an ASIC fleet, what would it be?
Get on a thermal paste schedule.
Okay, I like that.
these units, these units are high power density, like I was saying. You
Mhm.
know, the OEM thermal paste from the factory, is, it's okay. It's okay.
Mhm.
But I can guarantee you that if a machine was operating for a 6 to 9 month period, if I took that down, disassembled it, it'd be dust. You know what I mean?
Of
It's
course.
not like, the CPU in your computer that only, throttles when it's, tasked.
Uh-huh.
These things are buzzing 24/7,
Mhm.
all around the clock. That difference in, thermal load between your CPU and your ASIC is crazy. Like your CPU's thermal paste, you can get away with changing once every 2 years.
Mhm.
I would recommend a slightly lower interval than that, but regardless, your ASICs, you got to do them every 6 to 9 months, and
Mhm.
also beyond that, clean out your fans. Clean out your fans, please.
Absolutely. I was just about to reach for what I got. I got a box down here next to me right now that has literally a box of fans in them that I just took off, and I keep a box of new ones, and then I'll just put the new ones on and I'll take the old ones off, and when I get to them to clean them I will, and then they go back in
Yeah,
rotation later on. So yeah,
there
absolutely.
you go.
Clean the
Smart
damn
man,
fans.
smart man. Yes, sir.
I mean, fans are 20 bucks, right? For 20, 25 bucks for a good fan. So
Oh
having a
yeah,
couple
yeah.
around is worth it to me. That thermal paste thing, you're absolutely right. And if for the viewers out there that are like, you have your small boys like a gamma or something like that, you guys have heard me talk about when you get your gamma in, the first thing I usually say is take the heatsink off, put a better heatsink on it, and while it's off, go ahead and put like some grizzly or something a little higher end on there.
Mhm.
It's worth it. It's not that they're putting crap thermal paste on there, but they're generally buying in bulk, and it's not going to be that top of the line. Try to get that
Yeah,
top of the line. You'll thank
they're
yourself later.
buying what's accessible to them.
Mhm,
You know what I mean? They just put whatever they have onto the ASIC.
mhm.
So like upgrading your thermal paste on your Lotto miner, among other things, is another life cycle extension
Mhm.
thing that you could do that will really help you in the long run, especially if you're one of those guys that are into overclocking and that type
Yeah.
of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And just doing something little like that, you will see, it's those little tiny incremental things that make it better with any miner. Doesn't matter what it is. Anything you can do to kind of to tweak it a little bit and make it run a little more efficiently, you're better.
Yeah, and
Absolutely.
do a little bit of research into the materials you're using as well. Learn about things like thermal resistance, thermal conductivity. There might be a better product out there that even though it's the OEM spec, as long as you maintain an acceptable range within what your device can handle. Maybe there's a better product out there that you're willing to spend a few extra bucks on, especially with your lotto miners. They're getting pricier and pricier, and you want to maintain your hardware as best you can.
Absolutely. Yeah. And don't be afraid to throw it into, your chat GPT or whatever. And do do your diligence on it, because don't just take it at its word, but put it in there and see what's comparable, like Alex said. So take a look at it. Sometimes you get some good ideas and you learn something too, which is always a good thing. The better you are at understanding how your miners run, whether it's a small miner or a big boy industrial miner, the better off you are. That's going to help you in the long run. So.
Yeah, what a great line too, because like I feel like we all got into this, this business, because we're individuals that have a sense of curiosity
Mhm.
naturally. You know what I mean? Because like when we first started, there was no documentation out there. Like the Bitcoin industry itself is just an amalgamation of different disciplines kind of merged together, and
Mhm.
we've kind of shot all of our operations out into the marketplace of ideas, and over time it's matured, and we saw what works. So like definitely do your research. Maybe someone else out there has found something great. Like don't be afraid to play around. Trial and error, is the best teacher I found.
Oh, absolutely. And I've broken so many of my mind. And I talk about that too. I'm not a genius with this stuff. And it's trial and error. Like you said, I put it on the workbench, I mess with it. I try to do my research ahead of time so I don't do something super stupid that someone else has already done before. And I mean, if it breaks, it breaks. I mean, I'm not saying like I just throw money away because I can't afford that. But occasionally you're gonna break something when you're trying to tweak it. It's gonna happen. So don't be
For
afraid
sure,
to
for
don't be
sure.
afraid to tinker. Let's talk about like small miners versus the industrial farm. So like, do you approach repairs differently when you're working with like someone like a home miner who has like we'll say like they got a setup in their back garage, their back steel building, and they got like an S21 XP or something like that, versus someone who has like a 10,000 machine operation.
Um, there are slight nuances for how we approach it, like as far as like managing our efficiency with our workflow process, but largely no. We standardized our process. So like if somebody, a single unit miner sends us a unit, we're going to treat it the same as if, someone who just sent us 15 pallets
Mhm.
of miners, once their repair back in an orderly time. We've standardized our process so that it gets the same sort of, treatment. So like we have like the same diagnostic flows that go into like the larger orders, the same quality assurance steps, testing criteria, the report that we send back afterwards. It's, the same setup, it's just smaller, so the scale shouldn't really, dictate the quality. The process should dictate the quality, and having a standardized process is what helps us kind of control that quality assurance process, so that we're making sure that the same standards of quality are being held for smaller miners and larger miners too.
Mhm. Right. Yeah. And that's great. That's great to hear, because that means, a guy like me sends in my two S21s to get looked at. I'm getting the same level of quality, the same level of respect as, like you said, the guy who just had a truck drop off 3 pallets of, miners on the fritz. So that's comforting. So that's great.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
for sure. And we want you to feel like that's cool too. You know what I mean? Like we don't want you to feel like you're lost in the system,
mhm.
which a lot of smaller guys often do. If you've dealt with, any of Bitmain's RMA process at all, their intake and communication is kind of like one of the things that we tried to solve. Being able to have access to on-site management as a customer is a big thing for us. So like if you ever wanted an update on your units, which we send regular updates to larger orders, but as a single miner, like if you like my personal phone number's on my business card. You know what I mean? Everyone has my Telegram or my WhatsApp. So if you wanted to check in, just be like, hey, how's it going?
Mhm.
You're gonna get me.
That's
you
awesome.
know?
And just so folks know, like when I reached out to Alex about this, even just this interview, I had sent in through. I went to the eon-digital.co website, and I sent like a right through the contact us form. I was like, "Hey guys, this is who I am. I'm reaching out to," like near instant response, which was great. So like I've always gotten a great response from you. So that's really cool. And I can see, since, like I said, I went through the same contact that a customer would do. I mean, it was just boom, like you guys were right on top of it. So that's great. That customer communication is always key, especially with somebody who's, again, if I've got, 12, 15 miners in my farm and two of them go down, I'm worried about those, right? Those are like my babies. So like the fact that I know I can reach out to y'all and you're going to get back to me fairly quickly. That's that comfort level as a customer, as a client, that people want. So great.
Yeah, for sure. And it's definitely, like I was saying, it's one of the pain points in the industry that we really wanted to seek to solve. Being having reliable communication between site and customer. It's really kind of, settles the customer and makes them feel like, they're not just a number in the queue.
Mhm. Yeah, that's great. And yeah, like you said, with some of the bigger companies, or the main manufacturers for their repair centers, not calling out anyone in specific. They've got a lot that they're doing, and you kind of go into a queue, and there's some challenges with that when you're waiting to hear back, and that uncertainty can be so unsettling. Just waiting to hear, like, what's
Yeah.
going to happen with
Yeah.
this. So yeah,
I'm
that
sure everyone's got a story.
I'm sure. Yeah, if you've ever sent one in, then you got a story. That's for sure. Most miners, small guys, we'll try to fix things ourselves generally if we can. The YouTube videos start going across our phone in the middle of the night. We start sweating like a a Key and Peele meme, and we're like, I don't know if I can do this. I'm a Navy guy, and like I haven't soldered in years. So like anything that would involve that, I start getting really like, I start getting the anxiety thinking about if I got to do something like that. Is there a point where you think, like, the guy that like me, that has his own small operation, where you would say, okay, yeah, some of those things you can do yourself, but these are the things you don't want to touch? Like, what would be that level that you say is the cutoff point that you want to get a pro involved?
I have always been an advocate for right to repair. I have taken the DIY approach with everything, from my home to my car to my electronics at home. I will always advocate that if you have the capacity, if you have the tools, or if you can acquire the tools, give it a shot. Go on eBay, grab a couple scrap boards, you know, refine your skills. Try and sit there with the soldering, the hot air pencil.
Mhm.
Try and take an ASIC off, try and put it back on, and then I think that kind of gives people some perspective into like when they feel comfortable reaching out to a pro.
Mhm.
Once you get your hands on these units and actually try to do, solder repair on them and troubleshooting them too, like some of the larger units, it can be a little difficult to troubleshoot, like
Mhm.
especially if you don't have a technical background. Always been an advocate to, if you think that you want to give it a shot, go for it. Like that's totally cool. But then once you kind of realize maybe you're a little, in deep water here,
Yep.
reach
Mhm.
out, and even honestly, even if it's not to, you know, send us repair work, if you want to just reach out and talk to somebody, someone that is there as a resource to talk you through. I'll be on WhatsApp and Telegram talking to people, being like, and Reddit too, every once in a while,
Mhm.
just being like, well, from my experience, here's X, Y, and Z, give this a shot, so
Mhm.
when you get to that level, know that, there are resources available for you, or if you just don't want to do it, you don't want to go through the whole learning process.
Yeah.
We're here,
Yeah. I'm of that age that I know my time boundaries with things and how much effort I want to put into something, and sometimes I would rather just pay someone else to do it. So I
Yeah,
get that.
yeah. You and a lot of other people too.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
And to know it's done right and it's done correctly and that, the work's going to be warranted. So if it does mess up, I know that I have that fallback to say, "Hey guys, something's wrong again," or, is it part of that repair? So yeah, absolutely. At what point does repairing a machine stop making financial sense? Like, what have you seen, like where a unit comes in? I'm sure it's happened. Where a unit comes in, you guys are doing your inspection phase, and you're like, this is a little too much. Like, I know if it comes in and it's got scorch marks all over the outside of it, it's gonna be like, yo, guys, But what is usually that point that you see? Like, is it like blown capacitors or what is it that you see?
There's a couple different hallmarks of, when, non-functioning becomes non-repairable. I think a lot of shops will stop after, replacing between 5 and 10 ASICs. We kind of aim for, a little bit higher repair success rate. So we go to, sometimes up to 20 ASICs,
Wow.
against my better judgment.
Mhm.
But there are some physical characteristics that are indicative of when a hashboard will no longer be repairable. The main domain, electrolytic capacitors, if there's been a massive overload event, a lot of times those will just be blown right
Mhm.
off. Like,
Right.
like you'll see the drain trace on the ASICs just exploded.
Mhm.
The LDOs will be fried. I don't know if you remember the old K Pros with the heat sink soldered on the top of them. A lot of
Mhm.
times you pull those boards out and you can see all the LDOs down the line right there are all just like carbon,
Just gone. Yeah. Yeah.
just gone.
Mhm.
Obviously something like that is indicative that there are a large quantity of ASICs that are defective on a board. The obvious physical characteristics where if we get a board in and it looks bad right from the jump, we'll unfortunately have to push that to scrap. If we're looking at it and we only see, 5, 6, 7 cracked ASICs, maybe a few shorted domains, we'll give it a shot. A
Mhm.
lot of places will just be like, we don't want to spend the time on this. But
Yep. Switch out the board. Right.
we're
Mhm.
a little bit of hardware nerds over here.
Right.
So like we kind of thrive on the challenge a little bit. So if we get a board in where we've already replaced 10, 12 ASICs and it's only enumerating to like 15 or 20 ASICs total, then that's when we'll start looking at scrapping a board. But if we've done 15, 20 and it's at like to the end of the chain almost and there might be only one or two left, yeah, we'll go ahead, we'll just do it.
Worth
You know
checking
what
it
I
out.
mean? Like
Yeah. No, that's
yeah,
cool.
we're
Uh-huh.
nerds.
No, that's cool. And you're right. Cause like, I mean, going back to my Navy background, I was on submarines and I was an electronics guy. And the rule with that was we didn't in the late 90s when I went in, Navy was getting away from like teaching guys how to solder. I would think it was probably one of the last classes that we actually had a soldering class. And they were just going to spare parts. Like we would get our, for lack of a better term, Navy Pelican cases, and it would have 20, 30 boards in it that are just wrapped and ready from the manufacturer, from General Dynamics or whoever it was. And the rule was, if the equipment's not working, you open the rack, you take the old board out, you chuck it, you slap a new board in. You don't troubleshoot, just put a new board in. I have a feeling that there's a lot of probably larger places that kind of go with that. It's more time expedient for them to just kind of say, okay, new board, done. So the fact that y'all do that troubleshooting is cool because, like you said, there could be times that you're actually saving that board that it didn't need to just be completely replaced. So
Yeah,
I like,
and that kind of goes also to like, do we want all of this electronic waste in our, landfills and stuff like that? Saving that space you're going to have mounting social pressures from all this electronics waste. And that's going to be a real issue with like the AI sector too.
Hmm.
Like all credit to NVIDIA, they make a great product. Hardware, like I said, is, combating the laws of physics.
Hmm.
And we're seeing that stuff push up and up against like the edge of what's possible, like right now,
Right.
especially with power density. So like, as, good stewards of, our community and our environment, like we want to do our best to keep preventable landfill from being tossed out.
Yeah.
So we're like I said, we're nerds and we love troubleshooting, so it's a win-win.
That's cool. I love it. Have you noticed? So like just looking over here, I hate looking at price action because I don't like talking about it, but Bitcoin's down a bit against the USD this week, a little bit right now. Have you guys seen any uptick in mining facilities looking more to repair than replace since the price of Bitcoin has kind of readjusted into a more stable zone? Are you seeing more places saying like, let's repair this instead of just chucking and getting a new one?
Yeah, and honestly, that's the way to go too. Is like you want to optimize, your mining rewards. So like it's a little more painful to send units off for repair when the price of Bitcoin's at 125K versus, when we're in a little bit of a downturn. It's a little bit, obviously it still hurts having that lost hash rate, but at the same time, your mining power is, even though it's reduced, it's better to get it addressed while the price is down. And that way the effect on the lost hash rate isn't as great. If your hash rate's down when the price is down, you don't miss out on potentially all the mining rewards too.
Mhm.
So it's definitely a big incentive that if price is down, I always recommend, clear your backlog, send your repairs out, get it addressed before you're scrambling before the next bull market to to get your units back up online. Like we have guys that are in Texas, where your flare gas and cap gas are a big thing down there. So like their kilowatt hour basis is already extremely low. So I know some guys that are still mining on S19 base models
Right.
because it's worth it for them.
Yep.
But as soon as the price goes down, they send all these units off to repair. Like we have S19s in house right now, fixing, repairing them for Texas guys.
That's awesome. Yeah, I had a Huddle Tarantula from Sovereign Hybrid Compute on here last month, and that's their big thing is the flare gas getting out into the Permian Basin, doing things like that. And like there's so many times I'll kind of half jokingly poke them, and I'm like, I got some 19J Pros over here. You got room in a Connex box for me that I could put out there because I know that like
You laugh, but that's what they're doing.
exactly, because
That's
it's
what they're
still
doing.
efficient for them, right? And that's amazing. Like I was like, oh man, so jealous. But you're right, and for them, it behooves them to keep those units up and running because it's super efficient for them. So
Yeah,
absolutely,
might as well.
the Eon
All
Digital
right,
web.
guys, quick shout out to the sponsor of today's episode, Altair Tech. If you've been thinking about getting into Bitcoin mining or scaling up your current operation, Altair Tech is who we use at Cinco Doggos Mining for our hardware. They're veteran Bitcoin miners, so they actually understand the equipment they sell. They ship fast from the central US, keep a large inventory of in-stock ASIC parts, miners, PDUs, and accessories ready to go. Whether you're starting small with something like an Avalon Nano 3S or scaling into the 200 plus professional mining rig range, Altair Tech has the gear to help you grow. And if you're new to mining, they offer free consultations to help you choose the right hardware and strategy. So head on over to altairtech.io and use discount code Cinco at checkout. That's altairtech.io, code Cinco. Altair Tech. Mine your independence and start stacking sats the sovereign way.
Yeah, might as well.
The Eon Digital website talks about root cause analysis and structured repair processes. We kind of touched on this a little bit before, but how much do you think that your success there and your repair pipeline comes from the process rather than just like the technical skill? I'm sure your techs are super great at what they do, but that process you were talking about, is that really the home run?
Yeah, I think that is, well, there are a lot of contributing factors to success, right? Obviously, having reliable technical skill, in our labor really kind of, helps is having that standardized process that, a board comes in and it makes tracking through the process a lot easier too. A board comes in, immediately we disassemble it, we clean it up really, really well, get all that old thermal paste and stuff off it. We have those boards go right to repair. A standardized process where there's multiple points of inspection, which is, I think, is kind of the real prop value in that, in having that standard, is that multiple people look at the previous people's work, ensuring that chain of quality success, where say one technician does some solder repair, and then it goes to the next person who's trying to reassemble, repaste it. They are also a quality inspection step in that process, so they'll look, making sure their solder joints look good, making sure the board's clean, checking the serial number in our indexing software to make sure all the serial history is accurate, and that before it goes on to the next step in the process. So having that process where there's multiple points of accountability makes a really big difference.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and that's great having that. I've worked in industries in the past that have similar processes with that, where that basically before when it comes to my station, not me personally, but when it comes to my station, I've got to sign off on the guy's work before me saying, okay, I'm taking custody of it now. I agree, your work was done properly. Now it's mine. So
yeah, and that comes from my PCBA manufacturing background, where they emphasize heavily on 5S lean manufacturing. Like obviously as an aftermarket repair shop, we don't have to adhere to the same levels of strictness as manufacturing does, because a lot of their processes are validated. The customer signs off on a lot of that stuff and it's proved. For us, we have the luxury of kind of picking and choosing what works really, really good for our process without having to go back to a customer and say, is this process acceptable to you? We can choose what is most efficient. We can choose where we can reduce inefficiencies with really quick decisions. We don't have to get approval for decision making like that. But a lot of our processes, stem from the manufacturing process of the 5S lean manufacturing process.
that's awesome.
So having that implemented has been very insightful.
Cool. Yeah, that's awesome. If you don't mind, what I'd like to do is just let's do a little hypothetical here. If I'm a customer, I come to the eon-digital.co website, and this is my first time coming here, and I say, okay, I've got an S21 XP that's down. Can you kind of walk me through the process of how this would go from my point of view?
Yeah. Oh, of course. So you're a customer, and you are looking for a hashboard repair, and you land on the Eon site. First thing you do is you reach out to us and you explain your circumstances. You say, I am X and I work for this company, or I'm a home miner, whatever. Give us, a little bit of context, what type of miners you have. You could honestly even, like, if you wanted to, hit me up in Telegram and give me the kernel log. I would even be like, hey, this is a good candidate for repair, or, maybe you should try this, replace the PSU. Looks like, something's going on with your sweep string. Maybe check the connections on your bus bar. You know what I mean? So before we even, create the pipeline, a lot of times for, the smaller operations, I'll just like get in a chat with somebody and just kind of help them troubleshoot on site, because then, the CapEx of having to ship a unit out to us effectively removed. So if we get to a point where we determine that repair is viable and a good option, we'll give you our address to our site up here in upstate New York. You send your units to us. When they are received on our site, we'll confirm receipt. We'll send you an email, or hit you up in WhatsApp or Telegram, whatever you prefer. And then from there, we developed a serial tracking app that we use for tracking serial numbers throughout the workflow process. We had previously used software like Jira, and we found it way too bloated for our needs. So we just ended up being like, oh, we'll just make our own. We'll input your unit serial number into our tracking software, and then we'll put the hashboard serial numbers into that same tracking software, so that the process of documenting everything that's happened to that unit as it's received in our facility, all the way to its testing results after we've done a functional test on the unit, are all tracked in that unit serial history. We'll get the unit in, disassemble it, get the heat sinks off it, get all the old thermal paste, the dust off it. As you know, a lot of these facilities that miners operate in are a nightmare.
I've seen the photos on Twitter, on X. Yeah.
Yeah, especially you Texas guys. You Texas guys have got a lot of dust.
Yep.
So we'll get rid of all that stuff. We'll make it, we'll get it clean enough so that we can get it in the repair shop to reliably troubleshoot, and then do solder repair on it. From there, we'll reapply the thermal paste and attach the heat sinks back to it. It goes back in the chassis, and then we'll test it and determine if the repair is successful or if it needs more attention. And then from there, it'll either pass and be palletized, or it'll fail and we'll do another round of repair. And we usually do 3 rounds of failed functional repair. So like if a board goes back in a chassis and it fails, like a lot of times the benchtop testers that you see a lot of the guys that do repair using only test the boards under a really light load. Like you don't want to have more than 20 DC amps on your bench really. While we're functional testing them, these PSUs put out, north of 250 DC amps. So being able to get the comparison between a bench test and an actual functional test is really important data and can determine whether repair is successful or not. So then if we determine the repair is successful, your unit's palletized or boxed up and we'll contact you and you can ship it right back to you and get it on your rack ASAP.
Right on. And you guys offer a warranty on your work?
Yes, we do. Yeah. We offer a 90-day warranty. Yep. So if for any reason, if it's related to the repair, you can send it back to us. Obviously, we'll help you walk through like the kernel log if you're seeing failures to determine if it needs to come back for repair or if it, like the PSU failed or control board failed or whatever. But if it needs to come back repair, we'll have it come back to us and we'll address it and, ship it right back to you, obviously on our dime.
For and I know this can probably be a moving target. What do you think is the right now, based on your load, what's about the common turnaround time on getting a miner through the system? Not locking you into an actual time, just a kind of a range.
It obviously depends on the condition of the miner that we receive. If it's in decent enough condition, we can get through 75 to 100 miners in about 2 weeks or like 10 to 12 business days. We definitely, in our efforts to expand, we hope to get that number even higher. So slowly but surely, we're working to get there.
Looking 5 years ahead, right? Looking down the road, where do you see Eon Digital at that point, like 5 years from now? Like you said, you got some work going on. You're doing some expansion there at the facility. What do you guys see kind of 5 years, 3-5 years from now? What are you expecting?
I feel like, down the line, obviously we want to grow as a business, but we want to be more than just, the option to send, your broken units to. We want to become, like a partner or a resource within, your fleet strategy. So to that end, we're sort of tinkering with the idea of developing some software that will help, larger operations, even some smaller operations, we can gear it towards too. So that if you are experiencing downtimes, then you can kind of flag those specific miners to sort of help automate that process. So we're hoping we can sort of streamline the repair process so that like I was saying earlier, one of the biggest things we want people to avoid is that building backlog. You see 1, 2, 3 miners start going down. It's a lot easier to have a piece of software that you put those into your repair bucket, so to speak. When you get to a point where you want to ship those out, now you have an automatic selection of units that you can ship off for repair. And we're hoping to be seen as the premier repair option in the marketplace.
Right on. That's cool. I'm looking forward to that. I hope for that for you guys too, because that would be super cool.
In process.
Right on. Okay, so I know you were at Bitcoin Vegas this year. Any takeaways? Anything that you saw there that kind of maybe from generally a mining standpoint, but maybe just industry wide that you saw that you said like, this is going to be a factor moving forward with Bitcoin or Bitcoin mining?
We see more larger institutional miners start pivoting to the AI sector. I think the landscape of mining you'll start seeing sort of the sweet spot for mining sites to land in that 15 to 50 megawatt area, where larger miners with gigawatt scales, they're going to convert to AI because, the power conversion on kilowatt hours is going to, favor AI for the next couple of years. I think a lot of the, that opens up an opportunity to a lot of the sort of self-tinkerers and people that, will, hit pull requests for those open source mining projects to kind of tinker with and make, more optimized units. And, like obviously we started off with like the bit axes, the single chips, but now we've got units that are like, what is it? The Octo Nerd, and it's got a bunch of chips on it, which is funny. We actually just had a Nerd QX in the shop last week. I was
going to ask about that. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about that. How'd that work out?
It was pretty cool. It was my first time working on a Nerd QX. I've done repairs on my own bit axes, the single chips before, and they're fairly straightforward. getting a chance to work on, a little bit more advanced progression of that open source hardware was a really, really cool, like it sort of gave me a break from looking at these Bitmain boards all day and,
Hmm.
kind of got to, flex the engineering muscles a little bit, put in I downloaded, the schematics for the nerd QX and was going through troubleshooting everything and getting a chance to, work on something that, you know, I think is really cool anyways, was a really good opportunity. And, like the guy that had gotten a hold of us, it was actually someone I met in Vegas.
Okay.
He, sells the lotto miners. And he's like, yeah, no, we don't have any idea what to do. There's like really only one person out there really fixing them. So I was like, well, yeah, it's, send it to my shop. I'll fix it for free, just pay for the shipping. The opportunity to work on something like that is really cool. Even if it's not like a revenue producing thing, it's just, a hardware nerd like myself just finds
Yeah.
entertaining. And, when you're passionate about the stuff, it's like cool to work on any type of electronic, but
Yeah.
specifically one that I enjoy.
Yeah, no, that's neat. And it's like you said, instead of staring at the ugly silver boxes all day, you got to look at something a little different, play with something a little different. And that's cool. That's cool. I had
Yeah,
seen about
he
that.
had the hydro cooled and everything. Like
Oh,
it was
wow.
really neat. He had RGB everywhere.
Of
It was
course.
awesome.
Of course. Got to have all the pretty colors. Yep. Um, so speaking of that, do you think like miners like that, like I've got a lot of small boys as well, like Nano 3S's, I got some bit axes, different types. I got some old like the original generation Q axes around here. Do you think the small boys like that, do you think that they bring people into mining? Like that's a good gateway drug for mining?
Oh, what a great way to put it, a gateway drug. That's hilarious, kind of. No, like that is honestly like the best way if you want to get into mining. It gives you an opportunity, a low risk opportunity. Some of the BitX gammas, they are very reasonable nowadays. I think the first BitX I bought was it was like $200 or $300 back in the day, and now the same one's selling for maybe $100. You know what I
We've
mean?
got them
So
for
like if
$60 now. Yeah. We checked last night. They're
exactly,
$60.
exactly.
Mhm.
So like if you got a couple extra bucks to spend, and you're interested in this stuff, that is the absolutely perfect place to start. It'll get you started on like understanding the architecture of the PCB design. It'll get you into understanding the firmware that operates the hashboards. It'll get you into understanding the pools, like if you want to pool mine or if you want to lotto mine. Like from there, a lot of people you'll see, like especially like I'm in the R BitAxe subreddit, and I'll see some guys be like, oh, I got my first BitAxe. And then like 3 months later, you'll see them with like a giant NSF like silver rack, and they've got like 10 of them.
Yep.
And they're like,
Yep.
yeah, all right, yeah, you got orange filled, buddy.
Yep. Yep. That's what we see that a lot too on our midweek mining every Wednesday. We'll have somebody come in and be like, oh man, I won a gamma from you last year. You sent me a gamma and now I wanted to show you my 4, Avalon Qs that I've got in my spare room. And it's like, all right, yeah, here we go. Congratulations.
You're in trouble, bud. You're
Yep.
in
It's
trouble.
just starting. Let me give you some names of some hosting facilities. That's what's coming up next. So yeah, no, that's great. And, let me see here. Okay, we're gonna do a quick lightning round as we wrap up. Okay, I'm just gonna kind of give you
Oh
some
boy.
quick ones. Most underrated Bitcoin miner ever made.
Ooh, the most underrated Bitcoin miner ever made, the S19 XP.
Okay, why is that? Why do you think that?
It is, in my opinion, the easiest one to attain.
Okay.
And now you can get them for like what, $300?
Hmm. Yeah.
The repairability and the accessibility. A lot of the old mining facilities are getting rid of them. So if you want one to play at home with, that's the next level up. S19 XPs. Also, honorable mention to Canon. Obviously the creators of the ASIC. Their Avalon series, really cool unit. Love those things.
Hmm.
Great option for home mining. Cheap, affordable. Great efficiency. Hmm. What are some other ones? I'm hesitant to say the Z15
Okay.
because I'm a Bitcoin guy, but Z15s are pretty cool.
They're
I'll
making
admit it.
money. Yeah, they're making
They're making
money. I
money.
mean, you can't deny it, right? You can't deny it.
They're
They're
making
making money.
money.
Hmm. So absolutely. And I saw you guys fix those too, right? I think I saw something in the FAQ that you guys will work on those as well, right?
Oh yeah,
Zcash miners.
we've got hundreds in shop right now.
I can
Hundreds.
imagine. Yeah. Most over-engineered miner you've ever worked on?
Most over-engineered miner I've ever worked on.
Something that just came in that you were like, what is going on with this?
Let's see. I had a chance to work on a Deci miner back when I was at Foundry. I think they were acquired by Auradine maybe a while ago. And I don't even remember the model, but I remember this thing had like almost 1,000 ASICs on it. It was wild. They were massively underclocked, I think. But this was like the first miner that had an actual LCD screen in the in the chassis, like the faceplate.
Mhm.
So it would tell you like the hash rate, the efficiency, the IP address that it's on, all that stuff.
Uh-huh.
I thought it was cool as heck. They definitely went for broke on it.
Oh man. Air-cooled, immersion, or hydro? Personal choice.
For longevity, hydro. From a repair perspective, I prefer hydro over immersion because I hate getting immersion fluid off of boards. I just don't like the feeling of it.
Okay.
I air cooled for accessibility.
Yeah, makes sense. You guys seen a lot? Do you see a lot of hydros come in?
Honestly, no, not a lot of hydros. We see way more air cooled than hydros.
Makes
Hydros
sense.
do a pretty good job at managing their thermals. As long as you maintain, your fluid loop and your rad, hydros are tanks.
Your favorite piece of mining gear that you have personally, your favorite miner?
My favorite miner, my BitAx 601. It was my first terahash plus unit that I had at home. It holds a special place in my heart. Shout out to Scott.
I feel you. Yeah, I hold this up once in a while. It's kind of hard to see. I gotta kind of do this with it.
You got one of those guys? Yeah, remember the Founders Edition?
Yeah, the white paper edition from Ixtech, and I burned out the V-Reg on it. I got to send it back to them. They're gonna fix it for me. But nice. It only hashes at like 500 gig, but I love it. It's my little buddy, and I don't want it to die, so I got to get it fixed.
Yeah, they're literally the perfect. I just keep them on my computer desk at home. They're awesome to look at, and they're a great conversation piece. And any chance I can get somebody into Bitcoin.
There you go. That's the key thing, right? Expand that network. One prediction you have for Bitcoin mining over the next 12 months. What do you see? And it could be anything. Better efficiency. The S23 is never going to come out. Whatever.
Obviously, like I said, we're battling physics here. So short of another evolution of hardware design, where there's some sort of massive leap forward in new chip design, efficiency is the last frontier for the current iteration of hardware that we have right now. I remember when we got to the sub 20 joules per terahash with the S21s. It was a major leap forward, and now they're talking about the S23 sub 10 joules per terahash, which is mind blowing to say the least. Like, that's crazy efficiency. Granted, they do. The hydro versions are supposed to be, I think, 10 kW on their power supplies for the hydro versions. But to do almost a petahash now, like think back to like the S19 days where we were just breaking 100 terahash, and we were like, oh my goodness! Now we're just like, petahash? What?
Yeah. Crazy stuff. Yeah. My S19s that I got sitting at my J Pro sitting here. It's funny when I think about that too, because I'm like, right now I can't even run them because they're not really worth it to run it right now for me. And like, a few years ago, it would have been like having these suckers, man. I would have been blowing circuits in my house to have them all hooked up just because of how great they were. So, yeah.
Right?
So it's nuts. All right. So we're going to start wrapping up. Before we part, I want to go ahead and give you the floor. Anything you think that I forgot to ask or talk about, or something you want to put out there, floor's yours.
I just want to say, change your thermal paste. Get that old stuff off there and put new thermal paste on your units, please.
That's great. That's going to be I'm going to name something in the episode about this, the thermal paste edition. That's what it's going to be. No, fair enough. So yeah, so I'll make sure that all our folks that are watching, I'll make sure that they have all the socials and the website and everything for you guys, so that way they can get in touch with you if they need anything. But really appreciate you coming on and doing this with me, taking the time to talk with me and put this out to our folks. I think this is a sector of Bitcoin mining that, like I said when we started, that people don't think about until it's absolutely necessary, but it should be something that they have ready to go in their book, just in case, because it's gonna happen. Like you said, breakdowns are gonna happen. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So being prepared for that is key. But thank you so much for coming on. I'd love to have you back on in like 6 months. We'll see how things are going, see if you guys have done anything cool that we can add on, and yeah, just touch base again.
Yeah, totally down, Joe. I really appreciate your time today, sir. It's great talking with you. And yeah, we'll be talking in the future.
Right on, man. Thanks a lot.